How's it going, everybody? So this video, I'm just going to be trying to give a little overview and review of my 2014 Arctic Cat Wildcat X, which was my side-by-side that I had previous to this razor that I'm sitting in now. I recently sold my other machine, the Arctic Cat, and bought this one from my buddy, but I owned the other one. Well, I bought it with 1,000 miles on it, and rode it to about 2,600 miles. I had it about 2.5 years, I guess, and so I figured I'd kind of do a little review on it and you know, give some things to expect or pointers if you're, you know, looking at buying one of those machines. The best I can anyway. I actually already made this video, but I had some audio problems, so going forward again here, this is just kind of off the top of my head. I don't have much structure to it, but to start with a little backstory, or a little background, I bought the machine, like I said, about 2.5 years ago, and it was listed on Marketplace and had a picture, and it was all together and looked nice. And I called the guy, and you know, he had it priced reasonable, and I called the guy, and turned out that he had the bed off of it, and it was sitting under his carport, you know, not fully put together. Said he had been changing spark plugs in it, which you don't have to pull the bed to do that, but I guess it's, you know, it gives a lot more access to the plugs. But anyway, he told me that it was kind of, you know, apart, and he had a couple extras to go with it and things, and told me he would take a little less for it if I bought it how it's set. And I don't know, I seem to be a sucker for that kind of stuff. So I bought it how it was. I'll try to slide a picture in here. But basically, when I got it home, I think it had been maybe abused a little more than I had originally thought when I bought it. But so going into some of the issues I had with it over my ownership, started out with like a water pump. It was leaking early on, and had to rebuild that at, you know, I probably had 1,200 miles or something on it. I hadn't rode it much, and it was only leaking when the machine was setting. It wasn't leaking when it was running. So, but I rebuilt that, didn't have any more trouble out of it. I don't know if maybe that was kind of a fluke deal or what. One of the rear shocks was internally bad. It didn't have any dampening anymore. All that, you know, it was making banging noises, and that was on my first real ride that I figured that out. So bought a used shock and put on it on the rear. I didn't have too many, you know, minor issues out of it. When I started, actually, there's a helicopter or something going over. When I started actually, you know, riding it some, I did have two electrical issues over the course of the time that I owned it that I wanted to kind of explain. And one of them was a main fuse in the fuse box, which is under the passenger seat. The terminal that the fuse plugs into must have been a little bit loose on the fuse, and so it got hot. It didn't blow the fuse, but it kind of started to melt the fuse, and it kind of started to melt the fuse box a little bit, and then it lost connection because everything got hot. And it worked fine that whole ride. I brought it home and tried to start it to get it off the trailer that night, and I was having an issue where it would lose power at the cluster when I would turn the key, and rolled it in the garage and figured that out the next day that you know, it burnt that stuff. So luckily I had a terminal to fix it with, and I I got everything apart and took my soldering iron and soldered a new terminal on, put it back together, and I made sure the terminal spades were really tight. Put a new fuse in it. I never had another issue out of that. And then sometime later, several hundred more miles, went on a real big ride one weekend. Brought it home, washed it. After I washed it, it was running bad. It was throwing some weird codes. Got it in the garage and kind of messed around with it. Then it wouldn't start, and it was saying stuff on the dash. I can't remember what it was, like maybe ignition off or not. I don't know. It was no ECU, or it was something weird. So I suspected a problem, somewhere at the ECU plug or something like that. I was hoping it was that, not something in the harness. And turned out that inside the ECU, it was pretty crusty in the plug. And most of it looked pretty good, but one of the pins had corroded in two, basically. And so I've got a whole little video on me fixing that. You can go back and find it in my videos if you're interested in watching that. But I got that fixed and never had any more problems. If I'd had to buy an ECU to fix it, it would have been kind of a big deal. I would have had to probably got a used one, because you really can't buy them new anymore. And I would have had it programmed to my machine, which only certain companies do, so I would have probably had to send it out. And kind of would have been a big ordeal. Luckily, I had a pin laying around and soldered back into my ECU, and I probably put another 700 or 800 miles on it, never had any problems, so that fixed that. I made sure it had dielectric grease in it. The root of that problem is that that ECU is also down under the passenger seat, like the fuse box. There's a drain under the passenger seat. It's kind of, without taking the seat out, it's not that noticeable. And with my harnesses in, I didn't like taking the seats out. And basically, I dug a bunch of mud out of there and washed it out real good, and then it was able to drain. But it was holding water before, I guess. I'll go through a deeper hole. It would hold water in there, and of course that was working its way into that plug all the time. But so if you buy one, keep that clean. I've seen both those issues posted a few times, over the course of a couple of years, since I've been really paying attention to the Wildcat X. And so it's not just me that had those issues. So, and I feel like those are issues that would have been tough for somebody that's not real mechanically inclined, or not really willing to dig into electrical, so it could be a major deal to you, it could not be. But luckily I was able to fix both of them without spending any money. Just it took me some time, and never had any trouble after I fixed them right, and kept that drain washed out. Aside from the things I mentioned, I don't think I had any major failures of any kind. It never left me on the trail anywhere. Normal bearing and ball joint and tie rod ends and things, stuff like that, which I've had on pretty much all my both my previous side-by-sides. I've pretty much had those type of wear items give me trouble on them, but it's pretty normal on an off-road machine around here. We ride Kentucky and Tennessee mostly, and it's a lot of ruts and rocks and hills and creeks, and so it's it's pretty tough on a machine. But like I said, I didn't have any major issues out of it really. What I listed is probably the most of what I ever had problems with. I never had any driveline issues. Some people, have trouble with the bevel gears and the engine. Mine still looked as good as the day I bought them, pretty much, when I sold it, because I checked them when I bought it, and I checked them right before I sold it, actually. Probably 100 miles before I sold it. They still looked really good. Never had any differential problems from the rear. I did replace the front diff because I had a used one laying around that I had bought, but the front diff, it had started leaking some from the seals, but the diff lock got sticky. Everything worked, but the diff lock was sticky, and I was going to take it apart and clean it up, but I decided instead of doing that, I would just swap the diff and take care of that problem altogether. So I did that. So I guess you could say I did have an issue with the front diff, but it wasn't major. You know, it wouldn't have been a big money fix as long as you're willing to pull it out yourself. It treated me pretty good. Like I said, it had been kind of used a little bit rough when I got it, but I took care of it best I could. If you're looking at buying a Wildcat, there's a few things I would mention. So they started out in 2012. So from 2012 to 13 and a half, they were a wet clutch model. Those were known, it seems like, a little bit for oil leaks. They were a lower compression engine than what was considered the X model later on. And so pretty much they didn't have the starter kickback issues and the case failures that the first X models had. But they were also down on power a little bit. But still a decent machine. It's still the same basic machine, just with a different clutch and belt setup. 2013 and a half to the end of 2014 was the first X model, and they were known some for breaking the engine case and the stator cover case because they were higher compression. And I feel like most of the problems were caused by owners as much as the machine, even though they were a little bit prone to it. If you keep your machine running good and you don't crank on the starter, if you give a little throttle and let the idle smooth out, then you don't have to crank on a lot, and usually you won't have a lot of starter kickback. So that really helps alleviate that problem. And they make an upgraded gear kit, which I swapped in mine right when I bought it, and it needed it because the gears were already getting pretty bad, and luckily the case was still fine, so I probably cut that problem off right there. Let's see, so after 2014, 2015, I believe got an upgraded engine case, but they hadn't upgraded the starter gears yet. So the engine case was a little better on a 15 model. They don't have as many problems because of that. Also, in 2015, they got an oxygen sensor in the exhaust, and that really helps them idle when you first start them. They'll kind of rev up just a little and then smooth into an idle, come back down into an idle, whereas the first X models would just kind of start and run real choppy until they kind of warmed up just for a minute and would kind of start to smooth out and find their idle. But 2016 got the starter upgrade gears and also had the upgraded case, and then 2018 had all that, the upgraded starter gears, upgraded engine case, and they also did the upgraded rear axles and hubs and wheel bearings on the 18, which is about an $800 upgrade. So that's was kind of a big deal too on the 18 model. And then the bevel gears were updated over the years. The earlier models seem to have more trouble with bevel gears than the later models, just in general. But like I said, I never had any bevel gear issues with mine. And when I say bevel gear, that's the drive gears in the transmission that are actually in the engine case also. The engine and transmission is all one unit on a Wildcat X or 1000. I never had any clutch or belt problems out of mine. I was running 30-inch tires with stock clutching. Never had the first problem. Never even took the belt cover off. I know I probably should have taken it off and blown it out, but on those machines you have to remove the shock to get the belt cover off. And I pretty much decided if I wasn't having any trouble, I wasn't going to tear into it. So, but I never burnt the belt. Never had the first belt problem. People complain about belts on some of these machines. I think most of it's user error. Unless maybe you're out in the dunes running hard or running hard on the road and you just simply get the belt too hot, which is possible. But, so, overall, if you're looking at buying a Wildcat, like I said, I have seen those electrical issues on other machines, so that could be an issue. The other thing I'm needing to mention is the steering. The steering's a bad design on these machines. They make a rack and pinion upgrade kit that's about $800. It's worth the money if you're going to keep the machine for a couple 3 years, at least long enough to get your use out of it. You can build your own. Probably cost you about $250 if you're if you're a good enough fabricator to do it. It doesn't take a lot of material. Just got to buy the rack and pinion, and of course I don't recommend doing it unless you're really confident, because it's your steering. So you don't want to be running 40 miles an hour down the road and have something come apart. So but there are options for that. In general, mine was a pretty good machine. Like I said, I had a couple issues. It could have been an issue for somebody that wasn't pretty mechanically inclined, but overall, good machine. A little bit tough to work on. Certain things are harder to get at. Both of my razors, this one and my 570, were a lot better on maintenance, but they were also designed later than the Wildcat, which came out in 2012. So that helps. There was a little more technology there, but they learned a little bit. But still a good machine. Arctic Cat has dropped the ball on the replacement parts for the 1000X. They just have. I hate it, but they did. There's certain parts people need: the stator cover, rear differential. I think even the bevel gears are getting harder to get, or maybe you can't get them new anymore. I don't know, but if you get one in good shape that's been taken care of, I don't expect, if you take care of it, you don't beat on it, I don't think you'll have any major failures like that for a good long while. But it's a pretty big bummer, that you can't buy those parts anymore. And they last made that machine in 2018, but for some reason they're not even making a lot of those parts anymore. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not like it's a Chinese scooter or something. It's, it was an expensive top of the line flagship model back in its day. So a little bit disappointed, in Arctic Cat for that reason. If I had bought one brand new and been a little more invested in mine, I definitely would have, not been real happy. But overall, good machine. If you're not worried about the lack of parts availability, and accessories are not what they are for some of the other machines, then they're still a really good machine. It rode good. It, four-wheel drive worked good. It went anywhere I wanted it to go. It was a nice, comfortable, powerful machine. Just if you're looking to buy one, I would recommend not overpaying, because the resale value is not there, and probably partly because of parts supply. And Textron, they changed it from Arctic Cat to Textron and back to Arctic Cat, and I think they've lost some confidence in people. And resale value is not as good as some of these other machines, so I recommend not overpaying for one. But aside from that, they're a good machine, and if you can get one worth the money, you'll have a lot of fun in it. So basically, I think that's all I really needed to say. If you have any questions or comments, just post them down below in in the comment section. I'll try to reply best I can. I've learned a lot about those machines between me working on mine and owning one, you know, over the past 2.5 years. And some buddies had some also, so definitely have some experience with them. If you have a question or something, I'll help best I can. But aside from that, if y'all stuck with me, thanks for watching. I know it's not a real interesting video because I'm just sitting here, but appreciate y'all watching, and we'll talk to you next time.